Welcome to part 2 of the sheet customization webinar. In this video, we will continue to look at the different options that are available in each sheet field type based off of the sheet type that you selected. Next, we're going to open up a medical history form and go over some of the differences because there are some key things that you need to know about. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually select an existing medical history form. We're going to come over here to the left side under the internal sheets. We're going to copy the medical history update form, highlight, copy. So this warning is letting you know that the problems and allergies that are in this sheet currently may not exist in your database. It's very important that the medical problems and allergies that you want to import into Open Dental from your sheet also exist in your database already. We'll go over it in just a moment, what needs to happen for that to work, but if you don't do this, you will not be able to import the problems and allergies into the patient's chart. So we'll go ahead and hit OK, and we're going to double click into the medical history update form. So this in a nutshell is what a medical history form should look like. You're going to have your basic information, you're going to have medications, you're going to have allergies, you're going to have medical problems. The first thing I want to point out is the fact that you're not going to have demographic information. That is why it is important to select the correct sheet type the very first time, because the patient form type has demographics in it. It has patient first name, last name, birthday, insurance information, all of that stuff that can be imported into Open Dental. However, the medical history form does not. And vice versa, the patient registration form does not have medications, patient allergies, patient medical problems. So you want to make sure you select that sheet type correctly the very first time when you're creating a new form. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've already gone over before, and that's the input field. So if we come up here in the upper right corner, click input field, we find we have different field types. So remember previously we had things like marital position, gender, insurance information. Now we have first name, last name, birth date, because those are required for you to be able to put this form online. We have our miscellaneous. We have our in case of emergency name and phone number, which were also in the patient form type. But now we have these input meds. What these input meds are your medications. So if you want to be able to have a patient add a medication in their sheet and have it import into Open Dental, you'd use an import med. So if you look at these right here, mark any medications that you are no longer taking and add any new ones. You add them by clicking in, the patient will select these and click in and type, just like any other input field. But this particular input field, because it's an input medication field, will import that medication into the chart module when you go through the import process. If we look at the checkboxes, we're going to find it's dramatically different because we also have these things called checked meds, as well as our allergies and problems. We're going to look at the checked meds first because these go right in line with the input meds. With a medical history form, if you want to be able to use it properly, you need to have a yes and a no for each question that's a medical problem, an allergy, or a medication. With medications, the yes is a patient typing. The no is this checkbox that we call Checkmed. Essentially what it does is it says, check this medication versus the medication input field, and if it is checked, it's going to remove it from the sheet when you import the information. So we have Checkmed 1 corresponds with input med 1, Checkmed 2 corresponds with Checkmed with input med 2, so on and so forth. So the typing is the yes, the checkmed is the no. You have to have that yes and no. We find with our allergies, we have our yes and no, problems, yes and no. Let's look at the allergies really quickly. We'll double click into the checkbox. Now remember how I said you need to have your problems and allergies in your Open Dental database? If you do not have them and the sheet is referencing them, it'll actually give you this pop-up and ask if you want to add it. For this case, we are going to add them because we do not already have them currently. So we'll add the anesthetic, and we see it's now listed in our allergies. Inversely, you can go into your Open Dental, go into lists, problems, lists, allergies, and add all the allergies and problems that you want from there as well. However, there are some things you need to keep in mind, and I'll go over them in a second, but it's very important that you are very detailed in your selections for your problems and allergies. You want to make sure that you only have them in your database once. You don't want to have like 3 different versions of penicillin, one where it's capitalized, one where it's not, one where someone left off an L. You want to make sure there's only one instance because it can cause problems with the yes and no's if they're not set up correctly. So setting up this checkbox, we see we have our mobile group caption, which we're used to seeing already. That's our question. So this question is essentially, are you allergic to anesthetic? Because we already have our question showing here, are you allergic to any of the following? Anesthetic being the question for this particular one. But we also, by default, have our mobile item captions. That's going to be our yes and our no. We don't have to type those up because they're already in here by default. We do, however, need to make sure that we have a yes and we have a no. And we need to make sure that yes and no both have the same allergy selected. If they have a different one selected, they will not work properly. One will be linked to one and one will be linked to the other, and you will not be able to add and remove them correctly. So it's very important for every one of these, the yes and the no are linked to the exact same one. And again, if you have 2 or 3 different versions of the same thing just because of spelling, or you have an extra, even a space at the end of the word, Open Dental will interpret that as being 2 separate items. So you need to make sure if you've got 2 or 3 of the same thing and you aren't going to remove them, you need to make sure they're both using the same one. I usually recommend take the top one or the most perfect spelling. Same thing goes with the medical problems. Don't have this particular problem in the list. It's for asthma. Let's say I did have asthma on the list, but I had a space at the end, or it's not capitalized. So let me do this here. I'll use this as an example. So I just added it into our database. And I'm just going to cancel out of here. So if we go back in, hey, problem does not exist. Would you like to create the problem? It gives us this warning because it's looking for asthma with a capital A, and that does not exist in our problems. So we can do one of 2 things. At this point, you can create the correct asthma with a capital A, just hit yes and create it, or we can hit no and use exactly what you already have in there. That is perfectly fine to do. However, just like before, you need to make sure both the yes and the no are using the same thing. So if I hit OK here, I go into the no for the asthma, it's going to give me the same question because, again, it's looking for the capital A. So I'm going to hit no, hit asthma. And now just as a demonstration, you can see over here, we have asthma, yes, and no. So that is now set up correctly. And it's going to link to asthma with a lowercase a in the Open Dental database. So that's how you use the problems and allergies. Very simple. It's just a matter of making sure you have your question, you have your yes and no set up correctly, and you're linked to the medical problem or allergy that you're wanting to use. I do briefly want to touch on this mobile yes-no override. All this is for is to change the wording for yes and no. By default, it's going to say the words yes and no. But let's say we're making a Spanish form, and instead of yes, we want C. So the mobile yes override, we're going to put C. Open Dental is still going to interpret it on the back end as being the yes that we're used to in English, and it's going to say yes value. But the patient's going to see the word C, and it's going to be more pleasing for them if that is their particular language. So that is another thing to keep in mind when you're setting these up. So now that we have those all set up, I just want to reiterate, it's very important to have the yes and the no for medical problems, allergies, and medications. I know there are a lot of offices that feel that it's not necessary. Just select the ones that you're using and just have yeses. That will work for an actual new patient form because you're just adding things. But if you ever want to use an update form, it's going to be the same form, but you need to have that no so you can remove whatever the patient used before. So an example would be cancer. Let's say a patient initially puts that they have cancer. So they mark yes, it's added to the chart module, and they get their work done and they come back 6 months later. The proper procedure is actually to make a copy of that last form and then have them update that form. But if you do not have a no, let's say they don't have cancer anymore, there's not going to be a way to remove that from their chart because you don't have a no. The only way would be to manually go in and remove it. But even then, the patient would have to tell you verbally that they no longer have cancer because you do not have a no on the sheet for you to remove it. So again, a little bit more tedious, but having the no as well as the yes responses for the medical problems and allergies, as well as these Checkmed boxes for the medications, are going to be vital for proper usage of a sheet. The last thing I want to show you on this medical history form is going back to the miscellaneous checkboxes. I showed you how to use a miscellaneous checkbox with the group where it actually will only allow you to have one option. I'm going to show you how to add multiple options. We've already discussed it. It's just a matter of not having the group name, but I want to visually show you what that's going to look like in a real-world scenario. So we're going to highlight everything that we have here. We're going to remember to get our lines. We're going to move these to make way for our new question. And we'll use our shift and arrows, move it down a little bit. We're going to copy a static text to add the question. Now this question is going to be simple. It's going to be, which do you use? Select all to apply. So double click in. And then we're going to need to create our checkboxes. And again, this is where you can use the copy and repurpose something that's already there. You just have to make sure you set it up correctly. So we're going to copy. That's giving us a warning. You can't have the two of the same. We're not going to keep it as rheumatic fever, so it's not going to be a problem. Double click in. We're not going to add anything because we're going to change this field to the miscellaneous field. We're not going to keep that. We're going to change this to question, which do you use? Select all that apply. And then let's say we're going to add one of the options as toothpaste. We do not want to use the group name because we want to allow for multiple selections. So we'll keep that, and we'll go ahead and make ourselves another static text so we know that it's going to be toothpaste. And then we're going to go ahead and create another one. So highlight, copy, paste, move in position. This one is going to be floss. And same thing, we keep the same group caption. As long as they have the same mobile group caption, they will be treated like they're in the same group. But if you make any adjustments to this, so let's say toothpaste says, which do you use? Select all to apply. But for some weird reason, we accidentally put an extra space at the end. This is now considered a different item. It's a different question according to Open Dental. And so it is not going to be grouped together with the toothpaste. So although it visually looks correct here, it's not going to work correctly on the mobile view. So if a patient's using a cell phone or a tablet, it's not going to work correctly. And it can potentially cause some confusion if it's not set up correctly to the point where you may have multiple things selected or not selected that you don't want. So if we look at these things here, these are considered two separate things because we have that space. We go back in here, remove that space. It's now one question. Let's go ahead and add one more option here. And for this one, let's do pick or water pick. Oops, we need to make sure our stack text box is correct size. And again, we keep the mobile group caption exactly the same as the others have it. Otherwise, they will not be considered part of the same group. But we do not want the group name, otherwise it will only allow for one option to be selected. So now we see toothpaste, floss, pick, water pick are all options that are grouped together. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK, and we're going to go take a look at this. We're going to go into the forms, add the medical history update. We can select all three without a problem. So that's how you use the miscellaneous checkboxes. That's how you set up your medical history forms. It's how you set it up correctly to be able to use for an update. The last things that we want to go over are pretty much items that you don't normally use every day. Usually they're used on maybe a consent form or some other option that doesn't import. So let's go ahead and pull over a consent form. We're going to go Setup, Sheets. From the internal, we're just going to take the extraction consent. We're not actually going to use much of the content on this so much as to show you where the differences lie with the consent sheet type. So we're going to copy that over, double click in. So we're going to see that input field is now limited to just a tooth number and miscellaneous. There's nothing that's going to import from a consent form. Checkbox, same thing. We only have a miscellaneous. Generally with a consent form, the checkboxes are used to say, I agree or I consent. They're not used for anything to be imported. However, there is a field that we're going to use that we haven't touched upon yet, and that is the output field. Output field is unique in that it can only be used when the sheet is actually part of the database of Open Dental. So that means it cannot be used online. Remember, in our input field, we don't have first name, last name, and birth date. So a consent form cannot be used online. But the reason for that is that the output text information is going to actually pull information from the database and put it into the sheet. So when you're using a consent form in Office, whether it be on eClipboard or a kiosk, or you're just printing it out, you will actually have the information that will pull in from the Open Dental database and populate into the sheet. Now for this particular sheet type, consent gives us patient first name, last name, and the day and time for today. Not a lot, but it's still more than the other things could do. But in addition to the output text, if we go back into the static text, we're going to look at a field that we didn't look at before, and that's these click to insert fields in the lower right corner. There's a lot of things that look kind of confusing. Long story short, they're just things that you can pull from the Open Dental database that'll show on the sheet. The reason why we didn't cover it before is because, same as the output text, you have to be on the computer attached to the Open Dental database for it to work. Online, if I were to put, say for example, even something like city, state, zip. Let's get a brand new one here. If I put city, state, zip, it has these brackets. Online, it's literally going to show bracket, city, state, zip, bracket. Now, if I would do this on a consent form attached to the database, it's actually going to show me the city, state, and zip that this patient resides. So that's why it's not something that we go over with the patient forms or the medical history forms, because you're not going to use those there, but you will use them in just about any other sheet type. Consent's going to be the most common one, but anything that does not go online can utilize these click to insert fields in a static text. I do recommend going over the manual and seeing what some of these are. If you have any questions on them too, you can always give us a call. But these are very nice to use when you want to have the sheet automatically populate patient information. Now, the reason why that's not available online is for the simple matter, there is no way to safely get a patient's information from their chart in Open Dental on your computer through the internet with one web link for the patient to open. So that is why you cannot use any sort of patient identifying information in a sheet to automatically populate when it's online. The last thing I want to go over is the combo box. Now the combo box is kind of unique. It's up here in the upper right corner. What this is, it's your basic drop down. It's you click it and things go down, you select one of the options. Combo boxes are nice to have. They're very visually pleasing, but they do not import any information. So they act like a checkbox that's a miscellaneous field. You predetermine certain things and the patient selects those from those certain things, but nothing can be imported. So if we look here, we have mobile caption. That's going to be our question. And then we have our options. Options are going to be the same thing as the mobile item caption. This is going to be what you would add as the response. So for example, we'll use something like I choose option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing very in-depth, but enough that it's going to give us an example of what we can use the combo boxes for. So we'll go ahead, I choose option. That's going to be our question. Option, we need to add one for each one. So for example, option 1, add 2, add 3, so on and so forth. And if you wanted to rearrange the order or delete something from the options, use highlight, remove, or use the arrows to go up and down. We're going to hit OK. Just like the inputs, you're going to need to make sure that you have a visual cue for the question. So in this particular case, we'll take a copy of this stacked text. And let's say that we were making this as part of the consent form, so we will just incorporate it. We're going to pretend like there was actually a question in this extraction consent asking which particular option we were going with. So we're going to make it fall in line with those questions. Now, very important, something we have not gone over. I'm sure you've noticed by now I do not generally put fields over each other, and that's for a very good reason. They do not work if you overlap fields. So say, for example, I put this combo box right here. The combo box would not show, or it would not work properly because it's being overlapped by something else. So you want to make sure that you do not have any overlap and that all of your fields are separate from each other. It's okay to have the lines actually touching, but you don't want them to be overlapping. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK on that. We're going to go check our consents. So we have our combo box down here. I choose option. And it's just a standard drop down. So it works very well for pretty much any question, but remember again, you cannot import anything in from the combo box. So let's say, for example, in your patient registration form, you wanted to use it for gender. You could use it for gender, it just means that nothing's going to import. So you'll have to manually go in and add the gender every time you have a patient that fills out one of these forms. So if you're okay with miscellaneous fields not being a checkbox, a combo box is a good option if you have multiple selections that you want to go through. But if you want them to be imported, then you need to use the checkboxes. If you want them to be able to have more than one option selected, you need to use the checkboxes. While we're on the screen, I just wanted to show you briefly as well. Remember those output texts that we were using? Patient first name, last name, Patty Medicaid, date, time, all right there, automatically populating. So if we go back into the sheet and take a look, we're going to see exactly what we were talking about before with the patient's name and the date and time for today. That is it for this webinar. Please feel free to contact our support team if you have any questions, or if you feel that you need additional help with making a sheet that maybe it might take too much time or effort for you. We do have the option to create the custom forms for you. Just click on the link below and we can go ahead and start the process to get you a quote to create these for you. That is all, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. If you have any additional questions, please contact our support line at 503-363-5432 or access our complete online manual at opendental.com, and make sure you're staying up to date on our latest training videos by subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications.